So on Monday, the government announced the revision on SST to boost its revenue and strengthen the country's fiscal position. To ensure that the majority of citizens remain unaffected, the administration has promised that essential goods and services will not be taxed. At least that's what the finance minister too said. But the SST document, which is over 222 pages and contains thousands of items, paints quite a different picture. Many people are shocked when they realize that imported fruits, even those that are produced locally, will be hit with the sales tax. For a better idea, Malaysia imports a lot of fruits, including apples, oranges, starfruit, ciku, lemons, rambutans, jackfruit, longans, and papayas. These will all be taxed as long as they are imported. And this doesn't even touch the more absurd things which the administration claims as non-essentials, such as butter and margarine, yogurt, almost all cooking oils except palm oil, fruit juices, almost all types of nuts except peanuts. I've compiled a thread of these items, and you may read it at the pinned post in this space. So Hann is with me today. He's a certified financial planner and a chartered financial analyst, founder of Ringgit Plus and right now Halogen Capital, Malaysia's first licensed fund manager specializing in digital assets and innovative investing. Yeah, Han, welcome to the session. There are a lot of things to be discussed about the SST increase. I just want to have your general opinions on this. When you read the 222-page document, and I assume you probably did, what are your impressions, basically?
Um, I mean, suddenly everybody, yeah, I mean, good evening, everyone. SST week this week, I guess. And suddenly everyone is a pseudo tax lawyer, right? Trying to read through tax legislation. But actually, if you look at previous sales tax and service tax, they call it order, ORDER. It's basically like explanation of the law, explanation of the Sales Tax Act, Sales and Service Tax Act, right? So, and it gives the Customs Department ability to be very flexible with setting rates and stuff like that, right? So it's not a law, it's called an order. And actually, you look at the previous order for SST. Last year it was service tax. 3 years ago it was sales tax. It's all similarly sized, and these codes can be like hundreds of pages one. So that's why these kind of orders will be very long too. So don't get too shocked or surprised at the size of these kind of things. And these are harmonized codes. It means globally, like when people export import things, they use the same code. So we are quite, what's the word to use? Quite harmonized with or in sync with global import and export stuff, and they can be quite long. So don't get too intimidated by the length. But the main thing is that it is the one thing I would say is a bit shocking at the breadth of the new SST non-exempted goods. So actually, just a bit of context for everybody. Malaysia has a sales tax, right? 10%, but there's a list of things which are exempted and a list of things which are at a 5% rate. Previously, the list of things exempted was quite long. Food stuff, literally all food was exempted, stuff like that, right? And with the exception of very, very little things. And then over time, the exemptions reduce, right? And then they go into a 5% list. And then if they're not in the 5% list, is standard 10%, right? So what I'll say is you got to think of this sales tax as a 0, 5, or 10. And service tax now, it used to be just standard 6%. I guess everybody remembers going to McDonald's, buy something, then they add 6%. 6%. You go to a restaurant, there's a 6% there. That's a service tax. Since last year, though, 2024, I think it was March, some sectors, except food, moved up to 8% already. So just so everyone knows, like, it's not that shocking. It shouldn't be that shocking to us because, number one, the government has been expanding SST. And actually, last year in the budget, also there was a mention of this is going to happen, right? It's just I think we're all a bit shocked at the breadth and how so many things were captured.
Yeah, I just want to revert back to the 222-page document. Sorry about this. When we look at it, right, is it fair to say that the items in there are subjected to 5% tax, or is it 10%?
A bit complicated. A bit complicated. So there's actually 5 documents, separate documents. Some people have merged them all into one, right? There's 5 separate orders. regarding sales and services tax. One of the orders, number 176, is on sales tax, right? And in there are two big schedules, right? Sorry, one big schedule and one smaller schedule. The big schedule is the 5% one. The smaller schedule is very custom. It's like only 3-4 pages only at the bottom. Custom tax rates. So for example, petrol has a specific rate, which is like it's not 5 or 10%, but it's like 30 cents or 60 cents, something like that. Specific per liter cent rate. But the big list that you see is largely 5% stuff, right? And everything else which is not in this list and not in the exempted list is 10%. That's how that works.
Wow. Okay, so I do have an exempted list which I linked at the end of the thread itself. Later, if you guys want to refer to it, I will pin it up at the space also. Then actually, it's even more shocking, isn't it? Because if we read the exempted list and then we read the 222-page document, and everything else is 10% tax. I mean, I don't think it's just a bit shocking. To me, it's very shocking, right?
I mean, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that actually a lot of things had sales tax inside already. So, I guess most of your listeners are too young to remember. But back in 2014, when the government, well, it was 5 governments ago, Najib's time, first introduced GST. They introduced it in 2014, and then they gazetted in 2015. One of the key things they say is actually quite a lot of things are already sales taxed 10%. It's just that you don't know it, you don't see it. It's very opaque tax. And with GST, we make it transparent. Everyone can see it's 6%, right? But since when the second Mahathir government came in, they campaigned on SST, right? So they are okay, we abolish GST, put back SST. Then the opaqueness came back in. So actually, quite a lot of things had a 10% sales tax one. Like it's just that we don't really know about it because we don't see it in the receipt, right? Because it's not a multi-stage tax system. It's single stage, right at the importer or the manufacturer level tax, and then you don't see it in your receipts. It just flows into the value chain. So yeah, it can be shocking, but this is how it's always been actually, except for that 3 years that we had GST, 2015 to 2018. But I mean, one of the things I would say is in terms of this thing, like, am I frustrated? A little surprised, but not crazily frustrated. I think one of the things that most I try to remind most people we try not to just be angry for the sake of it. We be angry in the specific areas that matters To be fair to this Madani government, they did announce this in Budget 2025, right? Everybody remembers like, oh, we're gonna increase the sales tax on certain imported premium foods because we don't really you don't manufacture food, right? It's always imported or locally produced, locally grown or farmed or fished, or slaughtered, right? So everybody remembers the salmon and avocado tax, right? There was a joke last year that, is it just salmon and avocado? Turns out it wasn't just salmon and avocado. It's a pretty long list. And I think one part of the frustration we should all have is that it's really quite an expanded list versus what was mentioned in Budget 2025 in October last year, right? For example, the promise was, hey, look, it's only premium imported stuff, right? So like, oh, premium blueberries from America or premium strawberries from Korea. Very expensive stuff like this kind of 30-40 ringgit little box kind of stuff that people accept okay, you want to put a 5% tax on these kind of very premium stuff, sure, it doesn't really burden the everyday rakyat. But it's hard to say premium when we import all apples and in Malaysia, and as in all apples are pretty much 100% imported, right? And classic example is apples, oranges too. We import a lot of oranges, right? And these are consumed by pretty much everyone, right? You struggle to find a person who doesn't eat apples or oranges, and these are almost 100% imported because we don't grow them here, right? So for me, it's not just the hey rich person only going to be impacted by this salmon, avocado, kraut, right? Caviar and foie gras and all this stuff. No, it's quite basic items. I think that's the frustrating part. But I can tell you from the business community, I guess not sure how many business community folks in the room. The business community are very frustrated in that two areas. One, they gazette something in June the 5th, is it 6th? Or was it 9th? Yeah, June the 9th, last week, right? And you expect businesses to comply 1st July, literally less than 4 weeks. So how to upgrade systems, if I haven't done it, you say it's going to happen, then you suddenly announce and say it's happening next month rather than give people like a 3, 6, 12 month time frame to upgrade their system. So the business community is frustrated. Not to mention the ones who are directly hit and have to now charge this sales, or not charge the sales tax. They have their margins hit by this sales tax. But we discuss that later. But more like just telling you what the frustrations are, lah, right? So ultimately, that's the two big frustrations, lah. One is super broader than what was promised or indicated, and number two, from the business side, it's quite crazy. You expect businesses to change their systems in 3-4 weeks. It's tough.
The government is committed to continuing reforms. Now, this one is a quote from Finance Minister Tu. And then after that, he said, to ensure that the majority of the people are not affected by the revision, the government is taking a targeted approach to ensure that essential goods and services are not taxed. Now, I revert back to your first point, which is mainly what is frustrating, right? When we look at the list itself, how extensive it is, and the fact that we are taxing imported fruits when recently the health ministry published its morbidity report saying that citizens consume very little fruits and vegetables. I think there's also a survey or whatsoever, or like a research done saying Malaysia is one of the most obese countries in Asia. I don't know, Han, how are we supposed to become a healthier nation if we tax healthy fruits? Your thoughts on this?
They say eat local fruit law. No lah, joking. I think that is the big frustration, right? Like, which is lack of harmonization between government departments or policy making, right? Right. So obviously MOH is a bit it's not a big part of this discussion, clearly, right? Because you go like, hey, like you would have tried to secure a massive exemption for healthy food, right? Vegetables, fruits, even things like yogurt, right? And like kimchi, even as import cabbage and kimchi, right? But like
Cooking oil as well, right?
things which are directly and studies have shown that are good for health, lah, right? So for me, that's is a big problem. Fiscal revenue versus public health promotion is clearly revenue related, and then they it's a bit of policy incoherence there, right? Because look, like it's widely known we don't eat enough, right? And you can't say that, hey, stop eating imported fruits, right? Because, I mean, to be fair, we have quite a lot of nice tropical fruits, 100% locally grown, right? Papaya, watermelon, durian, pineapple, banana, guava. These are all 100% locally, as in we barely import any of this. In fact, we export a lot. So, I mean, those are good, yeah, sure. But many fruits which are good for us, right? Like apple, orange, grapes, we strawberries, blueberries, and they need not be super expensive, but like we import a lot of them and they're good for health. So for me, a truly holistic approach would have been better coordination lah between MOF and MOH, right? They could have done some stuff there lah, just to say, hey, look, like you don't get much revenue loss yet. You can still have it's not that expensive to buy cheap healthy food. So for me, that's kind of the thing. I mean, just info for everybody. Like Malaysia's fruit, specific fruits lah. Like I know we're focused on fruits because that's in the news, but actually our fruit kind of production or self sufficiency is pretty good, right? We produce, I think the last numbers were about 3-4 years ago, but we produce about 80% of the fruits we consume, right? Meaning, we only import about 20 something percent of fruits that Malaysians consume. The problem is, we even it's not 80% across the board, right? So for example, I said just now, apples, we pretty much import 100% of it almost, right? Barely anywhere in Malaysia actually grows apples, oranges, grapes. So for me, that was an issue lah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people also saying that, like what you mentioned just now, just buy local fruits law. But then, because we import almost 100% of the apples as well as oranges, right, you're effectively lessening the variety of fruits that you consume, which over the long term will affect the health and nutrition of Malaysians. I think the other aspect that we got to talk about is price hikes. Now, you mentioned just now, and we also talked about it, is that the order will go into effect on July the 1st, which is very soon. There is literally no time to think about this. Can you walk me through about how businesses will adapt to this change? Are they already starting to price in the SST? Are we going to see price increases way before July the 1st or after that?
Um, Price increases. I think, to be fair, like uh, 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 most of us roughly know what's going to happen, right? So what's going to happen is the sales tax on the sales side. We'll talk about services later, but sales in terms of this fruit stuff and all the things inside the importing and the manufacturing value chain, right? You will really only see the tax on the day lah. Meaning, like, there's no reason to randomly increase prices right now, and people will kecam you for it lah, right? But after July 1st, if you see suddenly your business importing goods and, or in this case fruits, right? You see, or is done at the customs level, not LHDN, is customs, Jabatan Custom, right? So when you import, you get an import tax, and then you have to pay it lah. So you think about it, similar to what we discussed a few weeks back with the tariffs, right? Like it's literally this, right? Which is you import something, you serve tax, you pay tax, sales tax on the imports. It's almost like an import duty, but not really lah. It's a tax paid to customs, right? And that's when you go, okay, look, now my margins are lower, right? And I'm going to have to either suck it up and have less profits or pass it on to customers. And quite likely you'll do some combination of the two, which is, hey, look, I'm not sure my customers can take suddenly a 5% price hike. Maybe 2-3% for example, one time, and then I'll scale it up over time. That's on the imported stuff, But think about it, if you actually do business in locally manufactured or locally produced goods, right? You'll be seeing all your competition suddenly can raise price, and you'll be like, hey, why don't I raise price too, lah? Because there was a marginal demand for my goods at those prices, and now suddenly there's much more demand because everybody wants to buy my things. I can actually increase price and have the same demand as I had before. So even someone who wasn't subject to sales tax may feel like, hey, look, like it's not a huge increase. I can increase a little bit, increase my margin a little bit. That is undoubtedly going to hit inflation lah. Like prices are going to go up. I think we're just waiting for economists to come and actually crunch numbers and say, hey, look, based on this, prices are going to go up by X, Y, Z. CPI is going to go up by 0.1, 0.2, 0.5, whatever that number is. And really like give us a sense of what's going to be lah, right? So yeah, it's undoubtedly going to happen. I don't think it'll happen this week lah. As in it will, as in we'll see it throughout the month of July. If, and this is a big if, the government goes through with this, because for me, like I feel that many businesses still not ready yet, and there could be a delay yet. But don't hold your breath lah. It could happen, it could not.
Yeah. I snapped a few pictures during my grocery run to Aeon last week, and I posted it into the WhatsApp group. So I think you saw it as well, right? I'll see after July 1st what's going to happen to the prices of apples and all that. But what's interesting that you mentioned is that those people who are growing fruits locally and the local manufacturers, okay, we are focusing on fruits because it's the most relatable one. You mentioned that they are likely to increase prices as well, right? Because now they have the capability to do so. So then this is a much more bigger problem than previously anticipated, where we just thought that, oh, okay, maybe it's only imported fruits, they go up in price. Sure, we probably switch towards local, but now you're saying that there is a likelihood that local fruit stores, they may increase prices also, right?
I mean, if you're a kind of a theoretical and sorry, what's the word to use? If you're like a economic purist, like you believe in like kind of the ISLM model and all that stuff. You'd be like, yeah, okay, like this was my demand at this price when I'm competing with imported goods at X price. Now the imported goods go up in price. My goods, if they don't go up, I'll get more demand, right? So I get a bigger market share. So that's good. But if I was really competitive at my existing price, if I increase my price, I'm still competitive. So why not? Right. So for me, unless there's a specific okay, look, no profiteering and all that stuff, and there's proper enforcement of that, by nature that's going to happen, right? I think that's just unavoidable economic theory, microeconomics, right? Like in terms of you as a business, how do you behave? I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen. I'm just saying the incentives are there for that to happen.
Exactly. I mean, if anybody is running a business and you have the capability to raise prices without affecting your market share, I think it's a no-brainer to do it, right? So yeah, we will probably see this, price increase lah.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I'll jump in again. Sorry, it's more like also like even if you are a local business, right, or rather a business focus on local production of like let's say give example of fruits again. I don't like to stick on just fruits lah, but let's just say in general, like there are other things that this SST, these 5 orders that came out it's going to affect your cost base also. It's not like you had no cost increase. For example, like if you had, uh, you did, if you had, if you were doing business with financial services firms like banks, right? Yeah, sure, your current account no fees, right? But like all other things, not related to basic banking services have gone up in fees, right? So if like you had an investment analyst, that's a fee now. If you're in a specific certain financing leasing agreements, those now are included in service tax. So for me, like it's not to say that hey, look, like you had no increase. You also had increase in your business because of this. It's not specifically on this kind of 5% fruit sales tax thing. But you could argue, hey, look, I need to increase prices too because all other things have increased for me, right, as a business.
So then, as a whole, you will see almost everything go up in price, right? I don't think it's shocking anymore. I mean,
No, yeah, for me, I think like let's not jump the gun. I think it's still like the order just came out last week. So what needs to happen is that the macro and microeconomic guys need to just funnel through this policy into their models and get a sense of okay, based on this and what we know of the supply chains and what we know of the business kind of levies and costs and what the impact is on businesses, what is the estimated impact on prices lah. I think it's important not to jump the case. It's going to go up. This question is how much only like if it's a 0.1 or 0.2 increase in CPI, I think most of us can slash okay lah, we'll take it lah. Right, but if it's bigger, right? If it's like 0.5 to 1% on average, which means higher for some things, lower for some things, then that's going to be painful, right? We got to prepare for that. But let's not jump the gun, lah.
talk to me about the impacts of restaurants, lah, because we talked about fruits just now. We talked about businesses, financial service just now, but I think we left out the elephant in the room, right? Which is restaurants as well as these type of similar services, lah. When imported fruits and the other stuff go up in price, definitely these restaurants, especially Japanese restaurants, right, that serve a lot of seafood, and within the list, a lot of seafood is getting taxed. Their margins will be more tighter, and inevitably they will increase prices in their menu as well, right?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, I think two parts to that statement, lah. First is, yeah, so for example, salmon 0% last time, now imported salmon 5%, right? So, by nature, it goes up. So that's one thing, which is your input costs as a restaurant have now gone up. Don't forget your if you rented from, let's say, a shopping mall, right? Your rental and leasing costs, or at least the service that the leasing company gives you, now it might be subject to 8% service tax, right? Your financial services, business loans, insurance premium for your restaurant business. Now the commission on the insurance premium might have a service tax 8%, right? It was just they always said even only basic banking services are exempt. Other beyond like big current accounts and stuff, could see increased costs, right? So fruits, vegetables for sure, sales tax. But keep in mind, like things are going up on the services side too, right? And that's going to hit you. That's one. And second, I think that's the most frustrating thing versus the previous GST regime is that it's all opaque, which means you can't see it as a customer, right? You can't say, oh, yeah, GST 6% ma, I also pay, then you claim back lah, right? You can't see that because sales tax is felt at the restaurant level, and then they hide it, not hide it lah. It's just it's not a multi-stage tax, right? It's just single stage. They feel it, and then they'll just increase price. You can't see what's the basis of the increase also. So, for example, it's just well, it's business lah. Business is business is the claim. So that's the frustrating part, which is this SST regime is far more opaque than the previous GST regime. And the argument back then was, oh, okay, it's not that it's so small, very few things are SST anyway, so it doesn't matter lah. But now it's big, right? And even the government revenue figures show that it's big, right? It's almost as big as GST already.
Let's backtrack a bit, lah, just to keep the people on track. What's the difference between SST and GST? And why do you think the current administration prefers SST?
Okay, first thing, these are just names. So for me, it's important to explain the names also lah. SST stands for Sales and Services Tax, right? Sales tax is typically on imported stuff and manufactured stuff, and services tax is based on well services. So like I said just now, like you go to restaurant, you pay 6%, right? Service tax, right? And SST, sales and service tax, as it is in Malaysia, is it's a single, what's the word to use here? A single stage tax, which means one-time tax. It goes into the person who pays the taxes costs, and then there's no claim back on the inputs, right? GST, which was introduced in 2015 in Malaysia, is the same as GST in Malaysia, in Singapore, same as VAT in the UK. It's a multi-stage consumption tax. Multi-stage means the same rate is charged at every stage. That doesn't mean it doubles up in each other. It means it's not like there's a tax on a tax on a tax, because whatever you sell for, you can claim back the tax on the cost off. So you only the end tax will only be whatever the percent was, and in Malaysia it was 6% lah. So a classic example is, let's say I buy a good for 50 ringgit, the tax was 3 ringgit, 6%, right? I sell the thing for 100 ringgit, the customer pays 106, right? But as a business, I collect the 6, right? And I claim back the 3. Right? So I pay the government 6 from the customer, right? But I collect back the 3 which I paid to my supplier. So the government at the end of the day only gets that final 6. It doesn't get 3 plus 6. It just gets 6. Sorry. There is a whole formula. You guys are all AI smart people now. You can just AI check it out and say, hey, what's the difference between SST and GST? But long story short, SST, in that scenario, the restaurant or the shop will just pay the sales tax, and then they'll set a price of the good, and you don't actually know what was the cost of the good or how much tax he paid, right? So he can say, oh, I have tax, but actually you don't know. You can't see his tax because it was only single stage. It's not multi-stage back all the way to you, the customer. So that's the big two differences between SST and GST. The other difference, right, was that during Najib's time, GST collection was almost double of SST collection. So I think in 2016, 15 or 16, the first full year, 16, the first full year of GST, they collected 40 billion ringgit from us. Well, us meaning everybody paying GST. And the year before, so 2014, before GST, we paid 18 billion in SST only. So clearly more than double. I mean, if you count the 1 or 2 year difference, it's probably about double. And they basically collected more tax from us, lah. Right? But today, like SST is now, like last year was 45 billion already. And this year likely to be even more due to this increase, over 50 billion. And I think some economists did some numbers and said, hey, look, if GST was still around at 6%, the government would have collected 60 something billion. So the difference between 50 and 60 is very small already, which means the amount that the government is collecting in SST now is very similar to GST already in terms of the levels.
Yeah, so perhaps that's the reason why that they prefer SST. Well, I think another thing that is more debatable is the tax on luxury goods, right? This one has been postponed until further notice. It was supposed to be implemented. They discussed about it, right? Then in February they said that, oh, it's been put on the back burner. Why do you think the administration is not focusing on this and instead deciding to tax lower value goods?
Yeah, I think there's two difficulties lah. I think with this high value, they call it high value goods tax, right? Why do I just whack all the sales tax, and then what about the supposed high value things, the luxury bags and watches and gold and all that stuff? I think it's hard because you can't go basically you can't go above what you're already charging now, which is this 10% rate. And two parts. One is it's harder to do that because you have to pass a new law, right? Whereas the SST law is already there, so you just charge the 10% lah. But to go more than 10%, you need a new law. You need to amend the law, so that's a bit difficult. Versus just, hey, the law is already there, just use it lah. Go from 0 to 5 to 10 anytime you want. Second, I think this is the bigger problem, is that what the government is realizing, as with most other governments in the world, is that unfortunately, capital is much more mobile than labor, meaning people, right? Capital means money, wealth, is far more mobile. It can leave very easily versus labor. Us, we cannot just pick up, or that we can, but it's very hard to just leave Malaysia, right? I won't just get a new job somewhere else so easily. But money can flow much faster than humans. So, and classic example of that is tourists, right? Tourist money flows in and flows out so easily. You try to increase something like a luxury good, you are going to impact tourism dollars very quickly, right? For not much a revenue benefit. So for me, two parts lah. One, harder to do a new tax. It's much easier to just use the existing laws that we have and just issue these orders anytime you want, and change things. And number two, the reality is it's hard to tax capital. It's easy to tax labor and consumption. So that's in short lah.
Yeah, to put it in a not so nicer way, it's easier to tax the rakyat lah, you know, than to tax those tourists, because the tourists, if you tax them, right, they just won't come. So that is the harsh reality of things, lah.
The harsh reality is we're all stuck here. Sorry,
Yeah.
it just doesn't sound. That's not true. Not true. As in, we cannot be in Malaysia if we want to. But it's a lot of friction to like leave our home. Right, this is our home. We want to work here. We want to live here. We want to earn here. We want to help our country. Whatever lah. Whatever reason why you live in Malaysia and work in Malaysia and love Malaysia. But money has no emotions, right? So if a Singaporean was thinking of coming to Malaysia and suddenly, I can might as well buy my luxury good in Singapore. Why should I buy in Malaysia? That is a loss to Malaysia, right? If we do that, right? And that's a net loss, there's no one that benefits. We don't even get the income. We don't even get the tax revenue because he's not going to even buy here. So that's the unfortunate reality that there's a reason why capital in the word capitalism happens, right? In a market-based economy, we have to be competitive. And if we simply tax goods which supposedly are for rich people, then those rich people, which are far more mobile, especially globally, the rich people are far more mobile than a local person here. That is the sad reality, lah.
Yeah,
And
because
to be fair, it's not just Malaysia. Sorry, I see like sounds like very sad, right? But no, it's not just Malaysia. Most governments around the world are realizing this, right? So every single government that's trying to do something like a wealth tax has to backtrack because they realize too late, or they might realize beforehand lah, that capital is very mobile, right? In this very globalized world. So it's very, very hard to just say tax wealthy people because unfortunately wealthy people are very mobile. Not the people themselves, but their capital and wealth is very mobile. So we have to be competitive.
the way that they manage the money itself already pretty much explains everything, right? When you decide to tax them more about these things, the luxury goods and stuff like that, like what you mentioned, they will just move somewhere else and they will buy from somewhere else, and it is really just a net loss for the country. And this is the tough thing, right? Because at the end of the day, citizens, we are quote unquote stuck here. We have to buy goods and services, and when it is hiked by the SST, we still have to buy them because we still have to consume, right? I think that brings us to the next important question, which is how can we deal with this? Okay, if we know we cannot push back already, let's say if it goes through, right, we have to accept it. And how can we deal with it? Assume that there is an inevitable price hike coming. What are you currently doing to adjust your budget, Han?
Buy the fruits and freeze lah. Frozen blueberries still got good nutritional benefit, right? Just joking, There's only so much you can buy and freeze, right? I mean, a few things you can consider, and some of them are really not the best solution, right? Like for me, classic one will be substitution, which is, well, I stop buying those too much of those imported stuff lah. I have to buy locally if I want to make sure that I can balance my budget. That's unfortunate, but it's just the reality, right? Which is we can't be picky. If something's taxed at 5 or 10% versus something which is not, then I'm likely to just go like, hey, look, and maybe I don't need the apple, orange, or strawberry today. I'll have the watermelon, banana, guava, rambutan. Still really good. I love it here. It tastes really nice. Why not? That's naturally something that's going to happen. That's one way. Second way is, well, taxes. I mean, what's the phrase, common phrase, which is, there is nothing in life but certain but death and taxes, right?
Oh, okay. I got it.
Something like that.
Like death is certain,
Uh,
but taxes is like something like that, right?
No, no, no.
No.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But the point here is like, I think, we're somewhat fortunate. Government is quite responsive to blowback, and we've seen this. And some of them people may call it a flip-flop government, but actually, for me, I do appreciate a government that accepts when they make mistake and then reverses it. Right? It'd be better if they were more competent and didn't make the mistake in the first place. But if things get really bad, there will be significant political blowback for them to reverse it. So for me, that's just say that on the side. So yeah, so I was saying, go back to what I was saying. Number one, substitution is a classic one, which is, well, substitute for cheaper things. Not the ideal solution. You can do what the Americans did before tariffs, which is build up your inventory. Inventory of what? Inventory of stuff that's going up, lah. Right? Yeah, fruits a bit harder, obviously, because it's not so long lasting. But pretty much everything else imported, yeah, you can maybe next couple of weeks, the stuff that can last longer one, yeah, buy a little bit more just in case. I mean, 5-10% is quite significant, right? It's if you analyze a 3 month purchase for 5%, that's 20%. That's like having a 20% loan. So just doing some mental math for y'all. And I think for me, the most important is to calculate your potential increase, right? Do not get caught flat-footed, meaning, hey, if you're doing some budgeting now, you're looking at the budget for second half of the year, perhaps add in a little buffer for yourself, like 3 to 5%. Yeah, save a little more. Uh, um, you can't control what the government does, but you can certainly control your own budgeting process. You can certainly control your own money, control your own finances, right? And say, hey, look, if this is happening, I want to make sure that I'm prepared for it, right? I don't get shocked suddenly from July or August onwards. I plan my budget, and then before end of month, I'm short already. Why? Because I did not plan for this increase. So, scouts, one of the scouts' virtues, right? Be prepared. If you're asking me what you do, Han, I'll probably just go look whatever my grocery budget is plus my whatever I'm buying these days. For the second half of the year, I'll just add extra 5% just in case, right? Budget a bit more such that I'm not caught flat-footed. I don't go hungry. My family doesn't go hungry last 2-3 days of the month, right? Because of this potentially 3 to 5% increase.
Yeah, well said, lah. I mean, there is a comment from Stephen over here. It says, as a producer of plywood and saw timber, we have informed buyers of 5% markup next month. Wow. So, I mean, businesses are already preparing for this. So, I think pretty much the price hike is inevitable. The question is how many percent of it we will see, lah. And depending on whether the pushback from the rakyat itself will move the government, and to reduce some of the taxes on some of the areas, lah. What do you think about this, Han?
Yeah, for me, this is inevitable, right? Uh, um, for those of you not around during 2015, the same happened, right? Which is businesses, GST came in. Some people had inputs which were GST exempt, but their services were not GST exempt. So they felt that as in, so what's I gonna say? They had to increase their price and they couldn't claim back the GST. So that was a double whammy for them, right? So then for me as a business, it's just about being honest with the consumer. Say, hey, look, like this has impacted us. We'll try not to hit you too hard. We'll try to absorb one or some of it, but some of it we just really cannot, right? So for me, that's kind of the if I was a business having to charge this kind of thing, this is the kind of communication I'll do, which is, hey, look, this is hitting us. We'll try and absorb some, but some really cannot, right? Hope you all understand. We'll try and improve our business, meanwhile, improve our services to you also. That kind of thing, I think that's clear communication. There's no one to blame here, right? Or rather, they are not the ones to blame, right? It's really government to blame. And for me, trust in the ability of the market to punish. Sorry, I use the word punish very very harshly. I mean punish in a kind of macroeconomic sense, or microeconomic sense, which is if you overcharge, the market forces will drive customers to another business anyway. So for me, trust in the market a little bit there. Especially now with social media, right? We can just kacam any business which we feel overcharging.
That's true. I mean, ultimately, most importantly, is to, like what you said, prepare a buffer, 5%, 10%, right? So that you can adjust to any price increases in the upcoming months, lah. All right. So the next question is, how should families with under 4,000 per month income restructure their spending immediately? I think you touched on it a few just now, right? It's that they should cut whichever areas that are most likely imported and then switch to local. Is there any other thing that they could do to restructure their spending?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that you might not be able to do is to buy like 3-6 months upfront, lah, right? So for me, if you are operating on a tighter budget, the thing to do is substitution, right? Which is if possible, go for the local version, right? If possible, and this unfortunately, I hate myself for saying all this, but it sounds like I'm a politician now, which is the worst kind of advice. But unfortunately, it's a crucial advice, right? Which is you got to identify all areas that directly fall under. So, I mean, Shinji has done the work for you guys. Every single line item read through already. He knows exactly what's being hit with 5%. Feel free to DM him. Hey, this hit can you check for me? Or upload it into AI, ChatGPT, and then you can ask ChatGPT or something. And then plan out your budget accordingly, right? That's one way. The other way is to go like, look, like it's going to happen, so I might as well get ahead of it, which is I have to ask my boss and say, hey, look, like this is happening. Like, hopefully you factor this into my salary discussion in the next update because this is really impacting us. And this is something that, despite being a business owner myself, I think it's fair to go like, hey, look, this is inflation, right? This is ultimately what's happening, and hopefully, businesses will reflect that too, right? And unfortunately, this is what causes inflation as well, which is wage hikes. But it's just something that you've got to look out for yourself. It's an open market for labor as well, right? So that's a couple of things to say. I'm not gonna say things like eat at home and all that stuff like that's like your mother could tell you that. But you asked me three things. Number one, substitution. Number two, no choice. Budget for a little bit more and save on other things. Budget that 5, 6, 8% more for groceries and services. Haircuts, yeah. Don't forget haircuts. Have beauty stuff. Service tax now 8% as service tax. So the second and third is it's time to speak to your line manager or HR or whoever does your salary discussions to factor this in. Don't forget.
When you say haircuts just now, right? That one is 8% if I'm not mistaken, and then it's charged for those businesses that have an annual revenue of 500,000 and above. So, but then because the economy is so connected and other businesses will see an opportunity to raise prices, then it's likely for all of these salons, even though those smaller salons, to raise prices as well, right?
Yeah, I mean to give you a sense, any salon with like 2 or 4 hairstylists is going to hit that 500,000 already, right? 2 to 3 hairstylists, you're likely to be hitting that 500,000 already, right? Why? Because look, it's not just 500,000 divided by 3 people, 150,000. Wow, hairdresser make 150,000 a year. Yes, but that's just the sales. Doesn't count the rental, doesn't count the chair cost, the shampoo, all that stuff, right? So like the net take home for the hair salons are actually very low per stylist. But yeah, 2, 3 stylists, you can imagine them making over 500,000 already. So even very, very small businesses will be hit. Right? 5,000 is not that small. Sorry, it's not that big. Or rather, they're underestimating what a small business actually looks like, right? 500,000 could be a very small business already because that's just top line. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's not just like fruits and food and all the stuff. It's services too. Sales tax is for the stuff. Services tax for the humans, right? For the stuff that people serve you, some service.
I think this just makes everything much more absurd, lah, you know. But thankfully you've provided a few tips for people to deal with it. Next question is, if someone has 1,000 to 5,000 ringgit in excess savings, where should that go right now? I think I know what you're going to say already, lah. It's probably going to go towards you divide it by 12 or divide it by 6, right? Then spread it across evenly to your next few months' budget to ensure that you have a healthy buffer. Or do you have a different strategy?
Well, it depends on what you mean by extra. If you have extra few thousand every month or just one month, right? Yeah, as in, and what's your current situation like? If you're sitting there very pretty, you got a very big emergency fund, solid insurance coverage, and a growing investment portfolio, yeah, do exactly what you can probably afford to do what Shinji just said. But if you don't have any of these three things, better start getting ahead of those three things, especially in an increasing price environment. No emergency fund, got extra 1, 2 thousand now, build it up, right? Got emergency fund, no insurance, for life and critical illness and medical, better start investing towards that. Got those two things, but haven't built out investment portfolio, start building up, right? Um, uh, the easy way start contributing, over contributing into your EPF to get going first, and then you can funnel some of that later to a more aggressive investment portfolio as well.
Another interesting question is, should we delay property purchases in case building material costs rise? What do you think, Han?
Yeah, actually, if you delay, then you pay the more expensive price, right? So yeah, uh, what's funny is that I think just now one of your listeners, Steven, right, said he does wood, right, and that's building material, right? It goes into wood. Wood goes into building materials. So on the sales tax hit, but what is actually not so popularized is construction services also now has a service tax, right? So architects fees and stuff like that, right? Things that go into construction, things that go into excuse me, the residential leasing sector, right? Going to be the leasing side at 6%, 8%, and then the construction side 6%. So both sides, right? So if you think that that's going to happen, then actually delaying makes your purchase more expensive, right? Things which have been built already, effective now, will be cheaper by nature than things which are being built from next month onwards. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, so probably something to think twice about lah. If you want to delay your home purchases, or basically any purchase in general, right? Because now if you look at the SST increase and how broad it is, and from what we discussed just now, yeah, likely to see price hikes almost everywhere lah.
Yeah, I mean, please don't take this as a passport or visa to go and like spend all your whole years of expenditure in 1 month this coming month lah. Please don't do that. But in general, when it comes to price hikes, it encourages current consumption. And it makes you want to consume more today rather than wait till next month or the future.
Now the next one is Bitcoin or crypto prices affected by global/local crises, i.e., wars, climate change, tariffs, etc. If not, then how do we justify its rise and fall value in the market? Ooh, I think veering a bit more off topic lah, but I'll give it to you anyway.
Thanks. As in just probably a bit of caveat there, a bit of qualification there. I do run a crypto investment business. Hello Capital is Malaysia's first fund manager with cryptocurrencies in unit trust. So we have these kind of questions all the time. I mean, long story short, like you have number one, you got to differentiate between crypto, the market as a whole, which is highly technology angled to it. Why? Because crypto as a whole is built on new technologies. It's opening up new use cases. It's highly speculative on that angle. So there's that big layer there to the entire asset class, and you got to split that up from the biggest crypto, which is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is unique. It has all that technology elements, but the way it's being used in financial markets today is very similar to a reserve asset or a non-sovereign asset, I like to call it. Non-sovereign meaning it's not owned by any government. It plays by its own rules. It has no ruler. It has no like founder. It has no, or rather, it has no controller at the moment. So actually, it's behaving very similar to a similar non-governmental asset, gold, which is typically a go-to when there's uncertainty in the world. So gold goes up when there's huge uncertainty, wars like the Iran-Israel war, Ukraine, Russia, etc. So then that gives a lot of rise to like uncertainty and flood towards uncertain assets. Sorry, assets which benefit from uncertainty. So things which are not related to government. But just want to first thing to separate those two, like Bitcoin from crypto. But both are highly sensitive to this thing called global liquidity, which means how much money is floating around the world today. And in times where there's less liquidity, meaning like markets are a bit jittery, people don't want to hold assets, they're not feeling that risky. They rather keep money in a bank account or keep money in a money market fund and drain liquidity from the market. So not much action, not much trading. That actually depresses Bitcoin crypto because it's highly liquidity sensitive, right? Why? Because it is very liquid, right? 24/7 trading, 100 billion US dollars a day traded. So there are many factors, right? That impact prices. Like we track them all the time. We track things like adoption. On the fundamental side, we track things like technicals. We track things like geopolitics, global macroeconomics, as well as this technology and liquidity angle, right? So long story short, many things can affect crypto. I don't have the time to go through the full analysis right now. And different things, many but different things affect Bitcoin specifically, right? Because it's unique within the space.
And I think that if any of you would want more information about this, just tap on Han's profile. I'm sure there's a Halogen Capital profile link over there. Follow Halogen Capital, right? Then you'll be able to understand the cryptocurrency market more, because it's becoming more and more trendy recently, considering how much one Bitcoin is worth right now. So we have Esri actually requesting to be a speaker. Let me just approve him real quick. Hi, Esri. Good evening. Can you hear us? You can unmute yourself right now.
Yes, just to confirm, you guys can hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Your question to Han. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for your sharing, Han. I do have a question here. So we discussed a lot about, the outcome or the impact of this SST hike in more to like the negative side of things. I want to ask, is there any good gonna come from this hike? That's number one. Actually, I have three questions, so I'm not sure if I should ask all three at the same time, or
Can go for it. Go for
is
ask all
it okay?
three. I'll answer all three.
Okay, so the first one is that what is the good going to come from this SST hike? For example, I do have some sort of like connecting from, okay, we're hiking all this premium importing stuff, which can relate to food security stuff that we're currently are having in Malaysia. For example, we have 37 million people in Malaysia, and then we have only 1 point something million registered farmers. So we are, trying to manage our food security as best as we can. So by hiking all this imported stuff, so we, in a way, empowering our local farmers, as well as encourage new emerging business in terms of agriculture and aquaculture as well. So those kind of things that I see, as a bystander, or possibly they do this, to help empowering the food security. But I want to know more if there's anything else, or is that true or not? That's number one. And is there any more good going to come from this? So that's question number one. Question number two, for us, normal rakyat per se, can we challenge? For example, we go to a restaurant. Mostly, yes, they can impose SST, but I did some readings. Something such as bakery, they shouldn't impose SST. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but if they do, can we like challenge them? And is there any advice how to challenge them? We should not pay for this 5% or 10% or 8%, for example. So that's question number two. And then question number three, you mentioned something about the economies are trying to, the macro and micro, trying to do the research on in terms of macro and micro. So is there any numbers projected yet? For example, something like the numbers related to our purchasing power decrease, for example, because of this SST hike. I mean, any kind of numbers that can we bring forward to propose it to our HR, so that the HR can do some salary adjustment, wages adjustment, and stuff like that. So those are the three questions. And you guys can ask me again if the things that I asked is not clear. All right.
No, thanks, Esri, for that very interesting questions. And I'll go through one by one. Quite good questions, really. The first one is okay. We talk about a few negatives to the right, yeah, in terms of SST. What are the positives, right? I personally don't think. I mean, I get the argument that increasing taxes on imported goods will stimulate local production. I get it. I think there will be some impact. I think there'll be better impact if they channel the funds that they raise towards doing that, right? So it's a very strategic move. You go like, okay, we've got a 5-year strategic plan for food security. We're going to increase SST on imported foods. 10% also can. Why? Because we're going to funnel all that 10% gain, let's say it's about 2 billion ringgit, into agro farming with these KPIs. We're gonna start getting self-sufficiency in all fruits and vegetables and meat and dairy. And I totally get that. I think there's some strategic element to doing something like that. But if you just increase taxes, right, and the market will find a way to get to an equilibrium. And I'll explain to you why, which is there is that it's just impossible for us to do some things, right? So some fruits, our climate just doesn't allow us to do, right? Doesn't matter how much money you throw into it, you cannot change the climate. And therefore, like it's inefficient for us to try to do it, right? We will, for example, if we try to create a biodome to have a specific genetic variant of a strawberry that's similar to the California strawberry or the Korean strawberry, it's going to cost us 3 times more. So it doesn't matter. As in you can import tax 10%, but locally produced Korean strawberry, Korean version of that strawberry is 3 times more expensive than Korea. Why? Because we just don't have that climate advantage, right? So that's why I'm always generally in favor of let's try and lower taxes where we can, and then really push where we're strategically or we have the advantage, right? Like for example, durians, big advantage for us, papayas, great advantage. Just keep doing more of that, export it more, such that we can get richer to import stuff that we want to import. So that's kind of my personal, it's me personally, if I was a policymaker, I'll push for that, right? Which is get better at all the stuff that we're already good at, export it like crazy, and then we can take that money and then use it to import the stuff lah. So that's one thing, right? I think it will encourage some local production, true. But for me, the deadweight loss of like causing all of us to pay, I think it's about 2.5 billion ringgit more in taxes, might not be worth that impact lah, right? I still think it's worth doing, strategically investing in certain sectors that make us better. But that's kind of that should be done without having to do this specific import tax. So that's one. The other positive thing, I guess, as a kind of finance guy and an economics guy, is that actually this extra 5 billion they're trying to raise with SST, and next year it will be probably closer to 8 billion because they're the full year. This year only half the year, right? Next year 8 to 10 billion more. It's definitely going to help our fiscal deficit go down, right? Right now they're planning 3.8 this year. With this, it's 10 billion extra. It's about 0.5 off, so getting very close to 3% deficit, which is among the best in the world. Like not quite good as Singapore, yes, but like still among the best in the world right now. Many countries are running massive deficits. Malaysia 2026, if we can get it to 3% because of this, looks very good for us. Very good, meaning our ringgit should be nice and strong. That helps, right, with inflation. There'll be more demand for our bonds. Good for us, good for government raising money to finance our expenditures. So there are some positive, right? Raising taxes, the global economies like it, right? We feel the pain, but at least in Malaysia, we get the global benefit. Globally, people see us as a very responsible fiscal government. So that's okay. Hopefully that answers the question in some way. In two ways, the local production one as well as other benefits, which is we get to balance our budget a bit better. Still not balanced though, 3% deficit, but if we get to 3% in 2026, pretty good. Second was, can we challenge SST? Like, can I go to a shop which shouldn't be charging SST? Let's say service tax, and say I don't pay you. You're not you're not eligible to charge me this. I think for me the main thing, as in I'm not the right person to ask because for me this is a lawyer kind of question, a legal question, right? Which is, hey, what establishments are actually allowed to charge SST? What do you mean by services? I think that there's a clear distinction there. For example, if a bakery is also got tables and waiting tables and providing services that way, then I think they are within their rights to charge you SST. But perhaps if you're just buying goods from them, that's not SST-able, right? So it depends. It's actually not on the activity, but the establishment. That's my understanding. Best to ask a lawyer. And I wouldn't challenge without first asking that lawyer lah. To answer your question. So long story short, I think all establishments have to do their nature of business. It's in their SSM. When you register for SSM, you have to explain what business you're doing. And then most businesses in Malaysia has to be licensed, right? So for example, you get DB Care license for something in KL, you get an MPBJ license in PJ for something, and so on and so forth. Based on your business license and your activity based on SSM or the business community, like what is what is SSTable and what is not. Right? So that's one. Last one was what?
It's about is there any numbers that we can
Oh
push
yes,
to our
yes, yeah.
HR?
Oh yes. Still quite early. Honestly, it was just 3-4 days ago. I think they announced it. I saw one or two investment banks already come up with something, which is surprising because I found it surprising they could do it in a few days. Maybe use some AI lah, ChatGPT or something. But um, they came out with saying like this SST will impact inflation by about 0.25 to 0.3%. So that is not that big, but also not that small. Right now, inflation in Malaysia is about 1.8, I think. Shinji, correct me if I'm wrong. I think 1.7 or 1.8, so fairly low. I think, sorry, that's not true. The last one was in April. It was closer to 1.5 actually. So low right now. But if I were you, I'll wait a couple of months, actually at least a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months, before having those conversations, because there will be a deeper analysis on what it will impact, right? If you go into a discussion thinking it will be like 2.2, 2.3 inflation this year, you ask for that, or use that as a basis, and in fact inflation becomes 3%, which is high but not crazy, it's high, uh, then you've lost out lah. So for me, I would wait. But you check Maybank, I think Maybank came out with something a few days ago saying 0.25.
Yeah, the inflation I just checked in April. Probably it's not the most recent one. April says it's 2%, so a bit higher. Wait, sorry, 1.4%. Yeah, I'll link it up later lah, so that you guys can have a reference. But Esri, does that answer all of your questions?
Yes, pretty much. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, really, thank you so much for those fantastic questions. I think we are at the end of our session already. Before I let you go, Han, just a final word for all the Malaysians out there. I think one piece of advice that you would give the citizens right now to deal with these inevitable price hikes, assume that they are inevitable already, and at the same time protect themselves financially. What would you say?
I would say final word of advice, I'd say the most important thing is that you've got to uh, know your rights. No, that's not the right word to do. Be a very aware consumer, which is you have a sense of what you're paying now and what you're paying later. So you know, right? You can't control prices, right? I mean, as a specific individual, you can't. As a group, we can actually control prices. Just stop buying a specific thing, you see price drops, supply demand curve, right? But we can't control everybody else. You can only control yourself, right? It's about being very, very hyper aware, right? Hyper aware of what you're buying, such that you know if it goes up by how much, right? And then you can plan for it. So for me, um, sure, feel free to complain on social media, and I also do that sometimes, right? Hey, look, like this is not fair. I don't think it should increase, but get angry, but get prepared, right? I think it's more important. So you can, if you want to summarize it into like 4 words lah, which is it's fine to get angry, but also get prepared, right?
Yeah, and also from what we said just now, okay, those few tips that Han shared. Number one, substitution. Probably it's inevitable as well, right? Switch to local fruits. Consume them as much as possible because they are likely to be lower price compared to those imported ones. Next, whatever items that you can stash, right? You're not really encouraged to stash, but if you have that buffer and if you know that the price hike is coming, right? You might as well just stash a bit so that you won't be so affected by the price increases. And obviously, the last and most important one is to have like a 5, perhaps even 10% increase, a buffer in your monthly budget, your monthly grocery shoppings or whatnot. Try and top it off by another 5 to 10%, right? So that you don't get caught off guard by your Aeon grocery shopping next week. You see apples going up by suddenly 5-10%, right? So hopefully these will prepare you guys to deal with the things that the government has thrown us lah. Okay, but at the same time, I firmly believe, I stand with you, Han, as well, that our voice is important. If we think that this is not a good policy, we should as much as possible, voice it out so that when the government knows that there is opposition, hopefully they will acknowledge it and will pull back some of the policies that they implemented. All right, with that brings the end of our session. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I will see you guys in the next session. Bye. Good night. Stay safe.